My mother-in-law abandoned my 7-year-old son on vacation, prompting legal action and my husband's distrust as he blames me for not revealing her abusive behavior earlier. I married my 29-year-old spouse, David, approximately 8 months prior. We have a wonderful relationship and we've been together for 2 years. I know my mother-in-law doesn't like me, and I can't say the same about her. It makes things really inconvenient for me when we are at any function with his family, though it doesn't matter much to me. We typically spend the holidays at his mother's house, which makes me feel really uncomfortable because I know she despises me and finds me annoying. My son, Ben, is the one person she despises more than me. I had my first husband when I gave birth to my 7-year-old son. Regrettably, my prior marriage did not last long due to health concerns my husband had, rather than any issues I had with him. I want to keep this brief so that I don't cry while typing, but my ex-husband, Jacob, passed away from a heart attack. It happened quickly, and no one anticipated it. It was a really trying time in my life. I missed Jacob dearly. Even if we were not meant to be together forever, we had been coworkers at the same company, and we grew close after dating for over 2 years. I married him at the age of 23, and at 27, I gave birth to Ben. When I lost Jacob at 29, my entire world fell apart. Ben was 2 years old at the time, and I was on the verge of giving up on life after my husband died. But Ben gave me the willpower to go on. I owe my son everything in a sense. Years after losing Jacob, I finally met David. For the first time, I felt as though I was connecting with someone on a level that I had only connected with Jacob. Being a widow with a young son, I was a bit dubious about moving on. My main concern was about the opinions of others if I dated someone else, but my friends and relatives persuaded me that it was time to move on, and if I genuinely liked him, I shouldn't hold back. They encouraged me to say yes when David asked me out, and I believe it was a wise choice. David is an amazing person, and I adore him greatly. I'm certain in his love for me, and he honors my previous marriage. He has always been incredibly kind and considerate with Jacob and Ben, and he respects them. It seems unbelievable that someone like David was born to my mother-in-law, who is truly terrible in contrast. I just wish I could say the same thing about her. Before I go any further, I wanted to let you know that for personal reasons, I never told David about the kind of person his mother is, and he literally had no idea. She had begun making strange remarks about me from the moment we first met, stating that she thought it was too soon for me to date another man exactly 4 years after my first husband's death. Additionally, it seemed she disapproved of her son's relationship with an adult who was significantly older and had a child. David was 26 years old, and I was 33. As time went on, it became increasingly evident to me that she disliked me. At least with my son, I was old enough to accept it. However, Ben was still a little child, and every time we went to see her, she would treat him horribly, even though Ben was just trying to win her approval. She would always speak to him in an extremely abrupt manner, and Ben could never understand why. Despite Ben's persistent efforts to win her over, she would simply keep pushing him away. I was aware of her hatred for him, but never tried to inform David about it because his mother had numerous medical conditions, including diabetes, hypertension, and arthritis. David felt obligated to take care of her, so he would visit her every weekend. His 35-year-old sister, Frankie, lived too far away to visit, although she did have 2 children Ben's age. She was a single mother after her husband abandoned her and gave up custody of the children. Given that she already had a lot on her plate, it was David's duty to ensure his mother was taken care of. Even with a full-time nurse employed, her doctor had advised that she should spend her weekends with her family for health reasons. She didn't have anyone else but David because her daughter lived too far away, and her husband had died a few years before I met David. I didn't want to put him in that situation either since I knew he wasn't the type of guy who would simply desert his mother. I kept my issues to myself as a result. I told my son to avoid interacting with her unless she struck up a conversation, and I left it at that. I never had to bring it up with David because neither she nor I would ever talk to one another. However, he had brought it up to me a few times, having noticed that neither I nor Frida spoke to each other, and that Ben also didn't engage with her. I had previously informed him that we were dealing with personal matters, and I didn't want to delve into it because I didn't want to damage his bond with his mother. I refrained from engaging with him despite his attempts to exert pressure and discuss the matter because I was aware of his strong affection for his mother and had personally witnessed his outbursts when others disparaged her. I didn't want to assume that doing the same thing would make him feel uncomfortable, so I just kept silent as long as it didn't bother any of us. At the time, I thought it was the ideal arrangement, but a few weeks ago Frida insisted on going on a much-needed vacation with David and his sister, Frankie. She stated that she would be purchasing her own airline tickets and staying in a different room at the same hotel. I didn't find it objectionable and was okay with that as long as I knew I wouldn't have to talk to her. Sadly, Frankie was unable to come with us because she sprained her ankle 2 days prior to the flight, and it was not advised for her to fly in that condition. She sent her kids with David and me, nevertheless, because she had promised them they could go. He drove us to Miami, where Frida made the worst decision of her life. Literally, the second day of our trip, David and I were both dozing off in my room in the afternoon after spending the whole morning at the beach. We were really exhausted. Ben was the one who opened the door for Frida, I believe, when she knocked at some point, but we were unable to hear them. Then, Frida persuaded him to go with her by telling Ben she would fetch him ice cream. This was the first time she had shown him such affection, and Ben was unable to resist following her lead. When we awoke, we saw Frida was not in her room and that Ben was not in the room. Since Frankie's children were also asleep and had no idea where Ben was, we went to the receptionist to question her. She confirmed that Frida had left with our son. We didn't think much of it because I reasoned that she might be attempting to make things right and had taken him out. I had not yet realized how insane she was and had no reason to suspect anything. However, I became rather alarmed when she returned home by herself a little while later. That's when I realized how insane she was and that I had been wrong not to talk to her about how much she hated us. I was wrong to misjudge her and paid the price. When she returned to the hotel that evening, Ben was not with her and she was alone. I asked her what she had done to our boy. As soon as I began to panic, although she appeared slightly insulted, it was evident to me that she was fully aware of the situation. She told me that they had been walking the streets close to the hotel and that at one point, Ben had wandered off. She had tried to find him, but he had simply become lost in the throng. I chose not to believe a word of it and made the quick decision to notify the police and speak with the hotel management. David was extremely enraged, and when his mother attempted to argue with him and claimed it wasn't her fault, he tore into her. All of that was unimportant to me because I was too preoccupied with my son and planned to deal with her later. I owe a debt of gratitude to the police department and the hotel administration for returning my son safely within 30 minutes. However, those 30 minutes were probably the hardest of my life, and I'll never forget how I felt at that moment. After we located him, he informed us that Frida had dropped him off at a nearby shop with instructions to wait for her, but she had never returned. Luckily, the store owner had been kind, giving him some candy and asking him a lot of questions to figure out what was going on. He informed the hotel authorities about the missing child by phone, which allowed them to locate him. Frida is completely deranged. She hated my son so much that her plan had been to leave him behind. I told David exactly how she had been treating us ever since we had entered his life because I did not think it was worth trying to maintain harmony after that incident. Furthermore, he was enraged with his mother, even though earlier I had thought he would oppose me and support his mother. We even filed charges against her after a heated argument. It will present some challenges for us to appear in court since we are not residents of that region, but we relocated to a new hotel shortly afterwards so she could no longer find us. We stayed very far from the one she was residing in, and she remained stuck there. We have not communicated since she called me a loose woman of morals for marrying David and made no attempt to apologize for what she had done. She accused me of being with him only because he was young and attractive and of using him for his money, only a few years after my first husband had died and I was unable to find someone else for myself. I'm not making this up. She spoke to me in the hotel with these exact words, and I could tell she had been waiting for a chance to tell me all of this. Her only goal was to make me look bad. However, she had never considered that David might not support her when she was in the wrong. Thus, he interrupted her, and now there's no communication between us. We would have returned home as well, but after talking it over, David and I decided that the kids needed to enjoy themselves more. We decided to let the kids enjoy themselves a little more and attempt to forget about the traumatic occurrence, rather than shortening the trip. The day after the tragedy, we told Frankie, and she boarded the next aircraft to bring her children home. She expressed gratitude for what we had done and felt it was a great idea, but she wanted her children to be close to her since she couldn't believe anything like this had happened. We understood her feelings and did not take offense. She returned home with her kids and also informed us that she would be banning Frida from ever seeing her children again because what Frida had done was unacceptable. She even sent an email to Frida, threatening to call the cops and get a restraining order if Frida came near her children again. It has been 2 weeks since we returned from the trip, and David's behavior has been off. His mother is still in Miami and is in jail, with the trial set to begin in a few days. David has been quite aloof since we came back. Yesterday, I decided to address him, and he told me he was sad not only because his mother was in trouble, but also because he felt that I did not trust him. He expressed regret that I hadn't informed him about his mother's actions against us sooner, thinking that things might have been different if he had gotten involved earlier. I understand he's partially correct, but it feels like he's trying to imply that I'm partially to blame for everything. It seems like he's saying that if I had told him about Frida's behavior, he could have stopped it from happening. Since our conversation, we haven't spoken, and I'm at a loss for words. I also feel guilty for keeping him in the dark about how poorly his mother was treating my son and me. Update 1. Hello, I sincerely appreciate your reply to my post. After reading the comments, I thought maybe I shouldn't have played mind games with his mother, especially since it put the youngster at risk. It's possible I was unaware of his mother's insane behavior, but I should have told him. I decided to apologize and admit that I hadn't anticipated this situation. I truly apologize for not having enough faith in him to discuss this matter. It was a foolish move on my part, given how he felt about his earlier comments. He apologized and was quite understanding. He said he would get upset with other family members who talked about his mother as a major burden. To him, she wasn't someone who should be criticized, and he was prepared to acknowledge that his mother did something very wrong and deserved the punishment she received. I'm glad we had this conversation and that the awkward atmosphere between us has vanished. Now that things are back to normal, I truly appreciate all the advice I received from everyone. Update 2. The trial has started, and we will be returning to Miami in a few days to give our testimony. Fortunately, since this is the state versus Frida, the court will cover the costs, so we won't need to pay out of pocket. However, we are not treating this as a holiday. David and I are a little anxious and unsure of how to feel. On one hand, we're relieved that justice will be done and that I won't have to deal with Frida again, which makes me happy. On the other hand, we feel uncomfortable about David's mother getting into so much trouble, even though she deserves it. We're lucky that there are enough witnesses besides us. We might call Frankie as well, but I'm unsure if she will testify against her mother or communicate with her in any way. She has forbidden Frida from visiting her or her children again and made it clear she wants nothing to do with her. Therefore, I'm pretty sure she won't want to be involved in the current situation. As far as we know, Frida has only been under home arrest. She was forced to move out and stay with a friend because the hotel staff would not let her stay there any longer due to the conditions. I'm not sure how she convinced someone to let her stay with them, but I suppose her friends share her tendencies. Not a huge surprise. Update 3. Hi there. After arriving in Miami 2 days ago, David and I were required to testify against Frida today. Ben is currently being watched full-time by a sitter at home by us. That seemed a little intimidating, and I couldn't help but feel sorry for her, but all of those emotions vanished the moment I realized what she had attempted to do to Ben. It was quite an easy process to follow. All I had to do was give my version of events, which coincided with what everyone else was saying, both the hotel staff and the shop guy who had been watching over Ben. Therefore, I don't think she has a chance to escape this. Even the most elite attorneys were unable to save her or use conversation to get her out of this situation. She will definitely serve time in jail for her actions. She appeared really upset both while we were with her and after the meeting was called to order. David and I chose to turn away from her when she attempted to approach us. We had no desire to talk to her, and to be quite honest, I don't believe it would have been a smart idea either. I wasn't in the mood to listen to any more of her petty justifications, so we simply turned to leave. Since then, David has been silent, and I can see why he must be having a lot more trouble than I am. Yet he has been going above and beyond for me, and for that, I am incredibly proud of him. He must have found it difficult to confront his mother, yet he persisted in doing so out of concern for Ben and me. Instead of taking the easy route and trying to justify his mother's actions, he made the morally correct decision. I also couldn't be happier that I married a man like him. Perhaps a lot of people will believe that this is a really small issue and that everyone would support it as not really important. Even though I am aware of David's strong bond and love for his mother, he nevertheless made the moral decision, and few people are brave enough to take that risk. I must give him the credit he deserves. It was quite courageous and morally upright of him. Update 4. We haven't testified in a while, and the verdict was revealed today. Frida was sentenced to a year in prison, but if she behaves herself, she could be released sooner, and I hope she does for her sake. A restraining order against her has also been on our radar, but I believe we will pursue it once she is released from custody. We shouldn't do that while she's inside. For that reason, she will have to stay away from us for the time being, and whether she wants it or not, everyone else will be sad for her because she will be detained in Miami jail and not here, and no one will be able to see her. I had no intention of going to see her either. I won't be able to see her anymore, not even those who liked her. I can't stop wondering what might have occurred if the prohibition from that day had not been enforced, and that gives me the impression that she is experiencing everything she deserves. Neither David nor I have any sympathy left for her. He dismissed the news that she would be spending time in jail, expressing his hope that she would learn from it. Thus, I believe that we will both be well. Update 5. Hi there. After being imprisoned for nearly 7.5 months, Frida was told a few days ago that she would be released on her own recognizance due to good behavior. Given that she had been charged with a third-degree felony, it was not surprising, though we were taken aback that she had to serve any time in jail. Nevertheless, David and I were aware that she would return when we learned about it. Thus, we made the decision to file the restraining order that we had discussed. My family and I will therefore always be safe from her. Furthermore, we will be able to call the police and have her taken away even if she attempts to contact us or approach us. She would definitely not want to go through that again. We've already met with a lawyer and plan to begin the process in a few days in order to decide what to do. We are still waiting for her to return. Her neighbors have informed us that the house is still empty and that no one has returned as of now. We won't take any action until then because it's possible she won't even return. Nevertheless, because she has no family in Miami, I'm not really sure what she's going to do there. Her friend is the only person she has in her life, nobody else, but the person who had allowed her to reside with them while she was under house arrest here. However, everyone is aware of the minor event that occurred and the reason she has been away for the previous few months, so she may appear much later in order to save face. Although we can't predict what will happen, we must be ready for anything. We will request a restraining order if the attorney shows up as we have discussed with her. That's the strategy right now. Frankie has chosen to follow suit. When we told her about it, she had been delaying it ever since Frida was put in jail, believing it was unnecessary for us to file for a protective order given that the target of the order was already incarcerated. Thus, it seemed pointless since the end of the vacation. We have been in contact since then, and she has been given updates on everything. Like David, I suppose she finds it much simpler to claim not to care than to truly give up on her mother. Nevertheless, despite their feelings for their mother, they are both compassionate enough to know that she is a bad person and should not be around us. They are both prioritizing their families, and I believe this is the correct thing to do. Update 6. Alright, so it's been 2 weeks since her release from custody, and today we finally heard from Frida's neighbors that she has returned. She came back really late yesterday evening. They also saw her exploring her garden today. Thus, it goes without saying that David and I contacted our attorney as soon as possible to inform him that we needed to begin the process of filing for a restraining order. We had almost come to the conclusion that she would probably not return because it had been so long. However, we were in error. We also let Frankie know about this so she could take the appropriate action as well. We don't want the kids to remember any of it, so we're trying not to mention her name too much. I wanted to provide you all with an update on his progress. After we returned from the trip, we started therapy for him, and so far he's been doing great. It appears that he can hardly recall the events with Frida, which is advantageous. Generally, we want children to remember significant occasions, but to be really honest, we didn't want him to remember any of this. Anyway, going back to Frida, our lawyer informed us that we had good reason to seek a protective order, particularly for Ben, given the extremely careless nature of what she attempted to do to him. The price for that has already been paid by her. Nonetheless, it never hurts to be extra cautious, and we're acting in that manner. Frankie is known to us. Nevertheless, we just hope that she is as successful in her endeavors as she is now. I don't think Frida is someone you can trust around anymore. She attempted something insane back then, and I still don't think she should have been forgiven for it. Perhaps she has already paid the price in line with the law, the courts, and the jails. They claim that she is clear, but she'll never be forgiven in my opinion. For the time being, that's all I know for sure. I'm simply going to put my family first and make sure they're doing okay, particularly David, as I am certain that he will find this challenging as well. He hasn't spoken much in a few days. I am aware that he is going through a difficult time, yet he is acting brave in everything. It simply makes me feel appreciative that I have this kind of guy in my life, the ideal partner. I'm sure everything will work out.